I am so excited about this. Welcome, Gary Cole, to group text.
Thank you. How are you?
Okay, I'm still reading your resume because it's taken me so long. I feel like you have done so many movies and TV shows and voiceovers that you're catching up to Michael Caine.
Well, that's good company. Then good. Yes.
Yeah, I feel like we need an Excel spreadsheet. It's like there's a whole algorithm here somewhere. But let's start with your new series, Waco, The Aftermath. It picks up basically after the 51-day standoff with the Branch Davidians, and that was 1993. So to put it in context of your career, the 3 movies that you had that year were Switch, When Love Kills, and In the Line of Fire.
Okay. Got it.
What were you doing when the actual standoff occurred?
Well, what's funny is, so the standoff, what was the date of the end there of the standoff?
93, April 19th.
April of 93.
Yeah, April of 93.
I had my first and only child on March 16th of 1993. So I remember it well because we were not far from the house ever because we had an infant. And that was the television show of the moment as far as cable news went. But that's, yeah, so it's a weird kind of comparison, taking care of a newborn and watching this very strange confrontation.
Isn't it funny what you remember? Because when my son Cooper was born, it was December of 2000, and we had the TV on in the room, and it was at the first half-hour break, not that I'm a producer, on the Today Show. So I knew it was 7:28, and the headline was, "We still didn't know who was going to be the next president."
Right.
Isn't it weird stuff you remember like that?
I do. Remember that. That's the first thing you think of when your child was born. And that was probably because it had been going on as we were getting ready, right? As we were anticipating when this was going to happen. Yeah, so that's a pretty big memory for me.
Okay, you play a character of a very intense reporter, private investigator. What drew you to the role?
Well, I'm a fan of these kind of recent history series. I think it's a great idea to look back. Sometimes we think of historical dramas and stuff. We want to go, back into Civil War and stuff. But there's a lot of very complicated and significant things that happened just 10, 20, 30 years ago in this country. And this is certainly one of them. And the character, his name is Gordon Noble, that I play, he's kind of a murky character. And I found some footage of him. He's kind of like the Forrest Gump of strange criminal cases. He was lurking around, and I saw press interviews during the JFK assassination investigation. And it's not clear whether he at one time worked for the CIA or he was still involved with the CIA when he was working with these two guys that were attorneys for the Waco and some of the Waco surviving members who were actually, had brought a lawsuit against the government. So, he's basically a guy that tries to find evidence for their case. And I'd worked with Giovanni. We were in a movie together. I don't know that we actually crossed paths, but I've always, really admired his skill as an actor, and so it was fun to do some scenes with him.
Gordon is very, very murky. You do get to drive, and I've seen the series, and it's amazing and it's intense, and you are very creepy in a great way. Like, I'm waiting for Gordon to show up. It felt very like Watergate in the park, like in the parking garage.
Right, sure.
With him.
Yeah, right.
You also got to drive a DeLorean.
It's an easier ride than to get inside, I'll tell you that.
Well, I was thinking about that. Even like at you're a bit older than me. I couldn't even imagine trying to get in. I can barely get in and out of my own car now.
Yeah. It's an effort. Yes.
It is an effort.
Yeah. But that thing couldn't be lower to the ground than it is. It's like you almost have to dig a hole to get in.
And one of the great storylines it's a fascinating movie in the way that it's made, that there are three competing storylines that are normally, there's an A, a B, and a C, but there's kind of an A and like a B and a B1. It's very interesting how that's made, how right. How those choices that were made. But one of the biggest storylines is the belief that Ruby Ridge and Waco sort of marked the turning point in American history where anti-government and domestic terrorism was radicalized. When you were researching for this role, because you already said basically you do a deep dive, did you come across anything that surprised you or terrified you?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of information now, and actually some really, really great documentaries, both about Ruby Ridge and actually there's a new one about Waco that is really, really good. That actually underlines the connection between Waco and, I mean, you can connect all the dots, Ruby Ridge, Waco, and follow that all the way to Oklahoma City. In this recent documentary, of course, now it's common knowledge that Timothy McVeigh actually was present at some time during Waco where there was a space where people came and gathered to kind of observe. They were from all over the country. And so, and when Oklahoma City happened, it took a few days before, I don't know who has actually made the observation, and somebody just asked a simple question, excuse me, what's today's date? And sure enough, it turned out to be, an anniversary of Waco. So it's, it's a phenomenon for sure. I mean, it's existed in some form throughout our whole history of this country, but I think it grew because of these events, and also maybe even more significantly, the coverage of these events. In our day and age now, 24/7. Like I said, I refer to it, and I don't mean to belittle any of the tragedy of it, but it's on some form. It's a TV show that lasted a long time, and people were really, drawn to it for whatever reason. And, but it probably spawned many movements,
Absolutely. And you're brilliant in it, as you are in everything, and everybody needs to watch. I literally binged the entire thing. Like,
wow.
in one sitting, which tells you everything. Okay, your career is a character actor's wildest dream. You've done comedy, dramas, TV, movies, stage work, animated roles. So take me back to the beginning. What inspired you to be an actor?
I think actually, initially, it was comedians. It was stand-up comedians, but when I grew up, stand-up comedians, the only basic place, I mean, you saw them on television, but you saw them in short bursts. But back in the 60s, there were several comedy albums that were popular, and they were almost, they sold almost as well as popular music did, depending on the comedian. Bob Newhart was an album that showed up at my house when I was a kid, and I remember listening to it and watching my parents listen to it and laugh. I loved it. I probably didn't get half of what he was talking about because I was like 10 or something. But the sense of an audience and getting a laugh was kind of intoxicating. And then it just led to me wanting to perform at school. But I think the initial attraction was these, people on the Ed Sullivan Show, but something about a guy or your mom that could stand on a stage, and just hold a room. That to me was fascinating. So.
Your breakout role. Okay, I'm a history buff, which obviously I didn't realize you were, but I am a huge history buff. I was a history major in college. I'm also a true crime junkie, and your breakout role was in '84 in Fatal Vision, which is the story of Dr. Jeffrey McDonald. It's a true crime story. He was a Green Beret accused of murdering his wife. Joel McGinnis, great book. But I realized, I did some math, you were 28 when you made that.
Right.
And it was your first big quote unquote breakout role.
Oh yeah, it was basically the first thing I ever did. I had done a small part of a TV movie before that, but other than that.
Well, that's a leap and a half.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you look back on it now and think, with all the miles I have now, maybe I would have made a different decision with this or slightly changed that? I always wonder with actors with these long resumes, ever look back and say, I know why I made that acting choice in the beginning, but now I think I would make a different choice.
Well, first of all, I don't think I would have made any other choice. I think I made the right choice. It was an opportunity that was too good not to do.
No, I mean an acting choice. Sorry. Oh, an acting choice. No, I would have taken if I could have played him, I would, but I don't think I was old enough, and I'm not a man. So that took me out of the running.
But how do you mean acting? Do you mean in terms of that specific character, or are you talking about?
Okay, actors, and I know I'm speaking a strange parlance. When you approach a role and you're performing in that role, you make certain choices about your character or how to play a scene, or certain things that are more nuanced. Mm-hmm. Have you ever looked back on that, even just 10 years after, but even from now, and say, I think I would have played this differently, or this particular moment could have been nuanced or different, or a different acting choice?
Yeah. Oh, well, sure. You have, especially when you look back on a career, and I've got plenty of things I could look back on and go, first of all, why did I try to do this? But second of all, there could be a million choices you would make differently. But I think that one thing I learned, that Fatal Vision was such a good first experience for me. First of all, I'm working with Andy Griffith, Eva Marie Saint, and Carl Moll. So they know a little bit about acting. And the character was, albeit a very grim and despicable character, it was a very interesting character. The things I did after that, not all of them, but I did a lot of network television, movies. And I think even if I had to go do them again, I would find a lot of different ways to reduce my sides, meaning that the way I was just a little bit too forced, and when I've looked back at earlier performances, that's what I see. But I think sometimes that comes from the better the material, the easier it is to play, because I think if you recognize that it's good material, you stay out of the way, you let the material take it forth. If material is less than you would hope it to be, or it's more, it's just not solid writing, inexperienced actors like myself then would just try to force the issue and actually make it a lot less, acceptable than it could have been if you made another choice. If that makes it.
Totally makes sense to me. And also it's years of just simply being alive and a broader understanding.
Yeah, it's a maturity, simple maturity, just in your life, but that shows up in front of camera. You learn, I guess you learn taste, in terms of, in terms of your own, what your limitations are and what your strengths are, and knowing when what you're doing is working, having an ability to kind of step outside yourself, realize what's working or what isn't.
You, and obviously also with Gordon in Aftermath, at Waco Aftermath, you play a lot of real life characters. I mean, I'm thinking about, I didn't even know until I was going through everything. You played General Custer. I mean, you played, and then I know it's not a real life character, but you also played Mike Brady in all the Brady Bunch movies. So for some of us, that was a real person.
Yeah.
And what I think is so good in the Brady Bunch movies is you have to play it straight. You can't play it mockingly.
No. That's why that movie worked. The movie worked for a lot of reasons. Betty Thomas and the writers are responsible for that. The best idea that somebody had was to leave the Bradys in the 70s, but leave them there and move everybody else forward into the 90s. So they were regarded as these very strange beings. But also, the point was, I think in all of the performances of just me and Shelley and all the kids as well, Christine Taylor, obviously, was to recreate those other actors, because that was what the draw of making that movie would be, because they wanted to be reminded of the series, but in a kind of a tip of the cap way, even though it was stuff that never would have appeared on the show, in terms of its rating, but it worked well for that reason, because we did kind of we satirized it, but in a loving way, we all spent a lot of time watching episodes, getting rhythms. What is Robert Reed's rhythm anyway? And I tried to recreate that as best I could.
But what fascinates me and is so, and a lot of actors cannot do this, you move so fluidly from drama to comedy to, I don't want to say physical comedy, but the more extreme types of comedy. You're a member of Steppenwolf, and you're doing Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Speed the Plow, and at the same time, sort of in the same time period in your life, you're making the Brady Bunch movie, just like when you were doing The West Wing. You're also doing Dodgeball and Talladega Nights. It's like, it's a little bit whiplash, but how do you find the way to move so fluidly between genres, including between TV, movies, and stage? Because there are three different crafts.
They are, but to me, in a way, the environments are different, but the actual objective, I don't find, is that different. And I never, and as far as comedy and drama goes, I never really look at it differently. That's kind of up to the audience. Now, if you're a comedian, a stand-up comedian, that's a different story. You must get laughs, so you have to be concerned about what is going to be funny, and you have to be concerned about that all the time. You have to think about that when you're doing a comedic role in a film or a television show, but it's still got to be a character, and it's still got to be, for me, because I don't consider myself just a naturally funny person. It has to be the truth and committed to whatever whatever's going on in the story, And hopefully it's set up to be funny because all the other elements are with it. So I always look at it as a character first and not whether or not it's in one genre or the next. Now, comedy, somebody said a great thing. I think it was Harold Ramis, which was that in drama, you can watch something and go, gee, was that good? I guess it was kind of dark. Was that good? I don't know. Do we think it's good? But a comedy, if it isn't funny, it isn't funny. It's something is either funny or it's not. It can't be sort of funny. It's deadly. It's got to work that. So that, I think that's to be.
Yeah, kind of funny doesn't work. But I forget where I read this, but someone was saying about how, a couple different things. In TV, you can play much broader, where on a movie screen, your eyebrow is 6 feet tall.
Sure. Right.
And then in theater, you're trying to hit the back rows.
Right.
And I would think, and I'm not an actor, as an actor, even just the physicality and the engineering of it has to be mentally very different.
Sure. My experience in the theater, though, was might be different than some other actors' journey, because when I started, most of the theater that I started, obviously all of it that I started with was all in Chicago. But I worked on very tiny stages. I mean, to the point where it was almost the same as being in front of a camera. Not all the time, but there was a lot of spaces that I worked in that had, 50, 60 seats, and it was intimate. So there was a style of acting that was similar to being, just involved with somebody in front of a camera. Obviously, the bigger the theater, the more the size of the performance and the projection grows. I've been in some of those spaces too, and that's a different thing. And just, being on stage is obviously different too. But I think it prepared me in a way so that when I did get in front of cameras for the first time, I wasn't all that thrown by it. I mean, I wasn't thrown by the size of what I needed to be doing. I was more thrown by the fact that there were 200 people running around behind the camera doing a job that I'm supposed to ignore while I'm doing this, because I'm used to, hey, you're all supposed to sit out and be in the dark, but that's not the way it goes. And that was the most crucial thing that I've learned, and that's what Fail Vision was helpful for, because it was a very early job for me, but I worked every day, all day, and I got used to that environment, and that was pretty crucial for me as I continued.
I mean, and so I know exactly what you're talking, because for me, so much of it is, could you please get out of my sight line?
Sure. Oh yeah. No, I call that too. I mean, that's one thing you can, but you have to call for it, because some people aren't aware. When you're supposed to be envisioning a flowing meadow back here, and there's a guy walking by with shorts and a hammer in his belt.
Carrying a bag of chips and a soda.
What are we doing? You want to try to eliminate.
So much of your work has been, God, it's just so much. There's been so much stuff that, are these cult classics. And since no does not seem to be a word in your vocabulary when it comes to work, do you ever look at something and go like, this is not going to be mainstream, but I love it so much, I'm going to do it anyway? I mean, how do your selection process is very, it kind of runs amok. Like, you can't look at something and say, Gary Cole is going to be in this. That's okay. We call my house Camp Run Amok. Yeah. That's a normal day.
I like it. I like that. I am rather random that way. Yes. Somebody asked me once, what was your initial plan in your career? In the early stages, how were you trying to shape it? I was going, believe me, there was no planning. It was just, oh, this is over. Okay, what's next? Now, I mean, you make choices, and there's very few things that, I mean, it's not like I was in a space where I was turning down boatloads of work. It just didn't happen. So, most of the things that are there were, one of the few choices I had at the time. A lot of those, the kind of movies you referred to that kind of hit a nerve, you never know that. You never know. You can assume what something's good for your own taste, but there's no way to predict if a movie or anything will break through and, have some kind of an impact. You just have to go with, your gut and say, yeah, I know I could be part of this and make my portion of it work. I hope all the rest of it does too. Yeah.
You are like the ultimate ensemble player, which when I was looking at your credits, which I'm still not done going through because I went like, seen it, need to see it, think I saw it. Oh, definitely have seen it. If lightning and most actors, they get onto one ensemble cast that's brilliant and it's lightning in a bottle and it's electrified. You do this repeatedly. Do you think it's your ability to is it because you're a chameleon and can move between parts and fit into an ensemble? Or do you just think, oh my God, I'm so lucky that this has happened repeatedly to me?
Well, I mean, certainly the latter, sure. I mean, I've been beyond fortunate in what and who I've been able to work on, or with. I just landed in many things that were just, great creations by writers with actors and directors that were at the top of their game. But I do think that somebody asked about, is there, people always ask, is there luck and fate associated with a successful career? And of course there is, but I do think that you can be ready for luck. And I think that's kind of what happened to me. I spent, a good 4 or 5 years in Chicago just working on theater constantly, doing all kinds of different things, because that was a necessity. And then when I did get some opportunities, in television and later in films, I think I was prepared to make those opportunities count because I had some kind of depth and diversity, as an actor. And so I think that did help to land in places. But, a lot of it is just, it's a dice roll. It really is a dice roll. My dice have come up good more than not.
Because it's one great ensemble after the next, which must mean you're also very pleasant to work with. Which is interesting because I don't know if you watch Succession or anything. There's been all this talk about behind the scenes, how Brian Cox does not like that Jeremy Strong's a method actor.
Right.
Have you ever fallen into that trap of not being able to leave a character, or is one of your great skills is you can go, okay, next, moving on?
Yeah, I don't stay in character. I don't stay in character between scenes. Depending on what's needed for a scene, if it is extremely emotional, what I will tend to do is not stay in character necessarily, but I will avoid people and I will stay by myself as much as possible and not have conversations and not just say, hey, what are you doing with it? Like I do a lot of the times. But if I know that I've got to reach some kind of emotional level, I will make myself scarce until the camera rolls. And that's my way of preparing for that. Whatever people got to do, they have to do. Actors all have a different way. A lot of people need chaos and stuff like that. Now, unfortunately, it isn't always pleasant for the other players, and I don't have any firsthand experience. I've never been in a situation where it was just, we have to endure this. that's never been my experience. Although I've heard stories like this story is rather public, but you can't argue with the result. You know what I mean? That's and the other part, the personal relationships between people, it's none of my business. But when I watch the show, I go, that's a genius show. And I know some of the people, Alan Ruck is an old buddy of mine who plays Connor. A couple of the writers came from Veep. Mark Ballad, who's directed a lot of those. He directed me about probably 3 or 4 episodes of Entourage that I was in. So
another great ensemble show. It's like you want to look at every ensemble cast picture and go, where's Waldo? Because you're in there somewhere.
Yeah, but a great writer, Doug Lyman, great writer, created that show. Jerry, fantastic, all the guys. I mean, it's So, but when I watched Succession, I just watched the last. I hope we're not spoiling anything. It's all up by now.
Yeah.
But that was rare television, and that was just fantastic.
It's interesting that you say that because I'm looking, I look at everything and I can think of so many of your shows that had those moments where you say, this is one of the best moments I've ever seen in television. And some of the best series, and I think about Veep, and good God, one of my favorite shows. I've actually watched the whole thing twice because I have absolutely no life. And, it was like a couple of years ago, my son left for college. I'm like, I just need something that's like comfort to me. And it was Veep, which tells you why I still go to therapy. The language on that show, and it's like Entourage, and it's like these other shows you've done. How did you handle when I've got to say, there's got to have been a time where you came home from Veep and your daughter said to you, Daddy, can I help you run lines? I mean, how do you deal with that?
Well, my daughter was pretty much grown by then, so it wouldn't have mattered. So her language is just as salty as Veep. Maybe not quite as salty. No, Veep was, that was a truly special experience. Some of the greatest times we had actually was the initial read-throughs of the scripts, because we didn't really get the scripts beforehand. They were like kind of minutes before they were tossed out. We would wait in a conference room and go, okay, they're ready. It would still be, the ink would still be wet. They'd give us you had like 5 minutes to go through and say, all right, where am I? And then we would read them almost cold. And, as something was coming out of your mouth and somebody else, I spent a lot of time, pounding on the table, hearing this language, but again, you had a killer's row of writers, writers. So it was just, it was a joy to be around.
What characters do you still want to play? I'm trying to think, like, you haven't played, I mean, good God, I can't say you haven't done anything with space because you also played an astronaut. I mean, are we looking for like deep sea diver? I mean, what is the one thing that you're like, God, I would love to take a crack at that?
I think it's because there is a inherently lazy element to me, I think, which doesn't think about, well, what I mean by that is, if it's in front of me, I'm reactive. I will do my best to make it work. But I don't spend a lot of time going, if I could create an idea that I would want, this is what I'm going to sit down and ponder this and put it all together. I just don't. Somehow it stops with, that might be a good idea someday. What's on TV?
Exactly.
Or let's go to the ball game, or what? So that's kind of where it begins and ends, I guess.
I'm going to call you a workaholic in the best possible way, because I am a workaholic. I am the child of workaholics. Actually, I'm probably like 3rd generation workaholic, which is not really super healthy. But how long can you go and relax and not start getting antsy about work? I know that it takes me at least 3 days on vacation to stop compulsively checking emails. And at about 2 weeks, I start to get panicky that I've been gone too long and I'm never going to get another job.
Right. I think I'm at a stage now where I think I'm more comfortable without working for a period of time. But I know I think that I probably start to notice it or miss it in some level after a month or so. It all depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're traveling, but still, there's an absence of something, and you do notice it. I think it was harder for me when I was younger, but there were periods that were, and there was a lot of unknown, a lot of like when, not if, but when, or I'm sorry, reverse that, not when, but if the next thing is, and so that and anxiety, or whatever kind of turmoil you go through, was probably a little greater earlier in my career. There was, I was still fortunate, but there were longer gaps, before, in the mid 90s and on into the beginning of, 2000s. But then, then things kind of started accelerating. And so there wasn't a lot of downtime in any real way.
My mom, it was so interesting. She wouldn't leave anything in a dressing room.
Right.
Because she would convince she wouldn't get back. Okay. We've got Waco Aftermath, which is about to premiere and is brilliant. Like I said, I've watched the whole thing. You've got your day job at NCIS. And I am very scared to ask this. What is your side hustle TV show or movie that you're working on now? Because they're all side hustles.
You got me, because right now there is no side hustle. Actually, just off right now. We finished the 20th season of NCIS. And so there's nothing I have on the table, save for still, which is nice. I still, even when everything else is down, there's still voiceovers to do. So I still do, Family Guy. I've been doing Family Guy since the beginning, a couple of other things. And that'll be, I'll be doing that the next month or two.
Well, everyone needs to watch Waco, The Aftermath, streaming starting Friday, April 14th on Showtime. I am so excited to finally talk to you after all these years.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.